It started as a small disagreement about the joint account. Maybe it was a credit card statement you were not supposed to see. Maybe it was the savings account your partner had been quietly building without ever mentioning it. Or maybe, and I say this with zero judgment, maybe you are the one who has been moving money, and you are not even sure when it stopped being practical and started being a secret. I have spent years studying the exact point where financial pressure stops being about numbers and starts being about something much bigger: loyalty, power, safety, and love. And what I can tell you, honestly, is that most people going through divorce do not get accurate financial information until it is far too late to actually use it. Not because the information does not exist, but because nobody sits you down calmly, without a billing clock running, and shows you the full picture before you sign anything. That is what today is. If you want more honest, no-filter conversations about money and relationships, conversations that treat you like an adult who can handle the truth, go ahead and subscribe right now. We do this every single week. And by the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly what divorce at 40 actually costs. The numbers that never appear in any article. The costs your lawyer will discover one invoice at a time, and what most couples could have built with that money if they had used it differently. Not to guilt anyone, not to talk you out of anything, just so you go into whatever decision you are facing with your eyes completely, fully open. Let us get into it. The lawyer's clock. Let us start with the most obvious cost, because even here, most people get it completely wrong. When people think about divorce legal fees, they usually anchor to a number they heard from a friend. 12,000, 20,000. Oh, it wasn't that bad. And they file that number away like it applies to them. It almost never does. Here is the thing about legal fees in a contested divorce. They do not accumulate in one direction at one predictable rate. They accumulate based on conflict. Every time you and your ex disagree about the house valuation, about the pension, about a shared debt, about which school the children attend, both of your lawyers engage, and you are both paying for that disagreement, simultaneously, separately. Let me tell you about Marcus and Diane. Married 14 years, 2 children, a home worth about $380,000 with a mortgage of $190 still outstanding. When they decided to divorce at 42 and 41, they both said, genuinely, that they wanted to keep it civil. They wanted to be mature about it. They shook hands on that intention. They did not keep it civil. Not because they were bad people. Because the closer they got to actually dividing a shared life, the more every single decision felt like a verdict on who had sacrificed more, who had worked harder, who deserved what. Their combined legal fees over 18 months? $47,000. And that did not include the pension actuary report, or the separate property valuation, or the barrister they needed for the one hearing they could not resolve. All in, closer to £61,000. The house they spent 18 months arguing about had a net equity of $190,000. They spent nearly a third of it fighting over how to split it. Here is your practical takeaway from this section. If you are in early conflict, before either of you has formally instructed a solicitor, a single session with a qualified family mediator typically costs a few $100s or pounds. That is the room to be angry in before you pay a lawyer to be angry for you. It is not a magic fix, but it is a significantly cheaper conversation, and it sets the tone for every conversation that follows. The pension, nobody talked about. This is the one that I see destroy people financially, quietly, years later. Pension splitting in divorce is one of the most significant financial decisions in the entire process, and it is also the one that gets the least honest attention. Especially at 40. Because at 40, there is still time to rebuild a pension, but only if you actually know what you are walking away with. Here is a pattern that repeats itself constantly in real divorces. One partner, often, though not always, the woman, reduced her working hours or paused her career to raise children. During those years, her partner continued building his pension, getting employer contributions, watching that pot grow quietly in the background. She contributed to the household in ways that never show up in a pension statement: cooking, childcare, school runs, emotional labor, all of it invisible to the financial system. When they divorce, her pension might be worth $40,000. His might be worth $220,000. And because pensions feel abstract, because they are not real money you can hold right now, there is sometimes a pull to trade pension for property. You keep the house, I will keep my pension. On the surface, that sounds clean. It sounds fair. It often is not, because the house needs maintenance. The house has a mortgage attached. The house might need to be sold when the children leave. The pension, on the other hand, compounds quietly for 25 years and is protected from most creditors. A pension actuary report, the document that tells you what both pension pots are actually worth in comparable terms, costs between £1,000 and £2,000 in the UK. Similar processes exist in Canada and Australia. I know that feels like an expense you do not want right now, but a 40-year-old who waves past that report might be a 67-year-old who is still working because she didn't know what she gave away. Get the report. Understand what you are actually dividing. Do not negotiate based on approximations. The infrastructure of a shared life, nobody talks about this one honestly, and it catches people completely off guard, usually about 3 months after separation, when the first full solo month of bills arrives. When you are in a long-term relationship, you have built what I would call a financial infrastructure together. One mortgage covering one home, one set of utilities, one grocery shop, one streaming subscription, one car insurance policy, one holiday budget for the family. When that infrastructure divides, you do not each pay half of what you used to pay together. You each pay close to what you used to pay as a couple for everything, which means 2 separate rents or mortgages, 2 utility accounts, 2 grocery shops stocking 2 kitchens, 2 car policies, 2 of basically everything. Research consistently shows that the cost of maintaining 2 separate households at the same living standard is between 60 and 80% higher than running one shared household. Not double, but close enough to double to completely reshape what financial independence actually feels like. And at 40, with children, the gap is even wider, because the children move between both homes, which means both homes need to be properly set up. Bedrooms, school supplies, sports kit, uniforms, 2 of things you only ever bought one of before. A woman I know, I will call her Priya, told me something that has stayed with me for a long time. She said, "I thought I was fighting for financial independence. What I actually got was financial exhaustion." She was not wrong to leave her marriage. Not at all. But she was completely unprepared for how expensive independent living was going to be, particularly in those first 2 years before everything stabilized. Your practical step here: before any final decision is made, build your independent monthly budget. Not the hopeful version. The real one. Include rent, food, utilities, transport, childcare, clothing, insurance, entertainment, every line. Then look at your actual income, or your projected post-settlement income, and ask yourself honestly whether that budget works. not to trap yourself in something that is not working, just to plan for the reality that is actually coming. Your children's financial future. This section tends to get emotional fast, so I want to approach it carefully and honestly. Child support calculations exist in every jurisdiction, the UK, Australia, Canada, and they are formula-driven. They cover a baseline: food, clothing, housing contribution, basic needs. What they do not automatically cover is everything else that makes up a childhood: school trips, sports clubs, music lessons, tutoring, orthodontics, university applications, driving lessons, the laptop they need for school, the graduation trip, the gap year they dream about. All of that, once the court order is done, becomes an ongoing negotiation between two people who may still have significant pain between them. And that negotiation, repeated hundreds of times over 15 years, is one of the most emotionally expensive parts of co-parenting that nobody prepares you for. Here is the harder truth that deserves to be said plainly. Children growing up in post-divorce households have, on average, fewer combined household resources than they would have had in an intact household. Not because divorce is wrong, but because running two homes is genuinely more expensive than running one. And that financial pressure affects what is available for children. That is not a judgment. That is arithmetic. The families who navigate this best, and I have seen this pattern repeatedly, are the ones who create a co-parenting financial agreement that goes beyond what the court orders. A written understanding about how unexpected costs are handled, how university is approached, what both parents agree the children deserve, regardless of what happened between the two adults. That conversation is hard to have in a room still full of anger, but it is enormously cheaper, financially and emotionally, than litigating every school trip for the next decade. The credit score. Nobody warned you about this one tends to arrive as a shock, always at the worst possible time. If you and your partner have joint accounts, a joint mortgage, or any jointly held credit products, your credit files are linked, which means that what happens to them financially, even after you are separated, even while divorce proceedings are technically underway, can land on your credit record too. If they miss a mortgage payment on the home you both still legally own while the property settlement drags on, that missed payment is yours as well. If a joint credit card that fell off both your radars goes into arrears, that arrears belongs to you both. People discover this when they apply for a rental flat 6 months after leaving, or when they try to finance a car, or when they approach a new mortgage lender and they are told their credit score is significantly lower than they expected, because of something they had no knowledge of and no control over. The fix is straightforward, but requires early action. As soon as separation becomes a real possibility, not a confirmed decision, just a real possibility, begin the process of financially decoupling everything you can. Close joint accounts. Move joint debts into individual names wherever possible. Contact credit agencies to note your separation. These are not dramatic gestures. They are protective ones, and doing them early saves you from a completely avoidable problem. What that money could have built. I want to say this part very carefully, because I am not here to tell anyone to stay in something that is genuinely damaging. Safety, dignity, and fundamental respect are non-negotiable. Some endings are necessary, full stop, but for the couples who are genuinely at the edge, who still have a real choice in front of them, I want to put one number in the room. The average total cost of a fully contested divorce at 40, when you include legal fees, financial advice, property restructuring, moving costs, duplicate household setup, and the financial disruption of the first 2 years after sits somewhere between $80,000 and $150,000 or pounds equivalent, combined, across the UK, Australia, Canada, and comparable markets. That is a conservative middle estimate. Now, what does 80 to 150,000 buy when it is invested in a relationship instead? It buys 3 to 5 years of high-quality couples therapy, weekly with the best practitioners in your city. It buys a financial coach who specializes in money conflict in relationships. It buys a proper, shared financial plan built by someone who understands both the emotional and the practical dimensions of money in a partnership. It buys the honest, uncomfortable, necessary conversations that most couples never have because nobody showed them how. I am not saying money can buy a healthy relationship. I know it cannot. I know some relationships end for reasons that have nothing to do with financial investment. But I do believe some relationships end because the people inside them never had access to the full picture early enough. And I think some of those couples, if they had seen these numbers clearly, if they had understood what was actually waiting on the other side of this decision, might have chosen to spend that money differently. So, here is where I want to land with you. If you are in a relationship right now, where money is a constant, low-level source of tension, where there is secrecy or resentment or conversations that never quite get finished, that is the moment to get support. Not when you are already sitting across from a solicitor. Not when the trust is completely gone. Now, while there is still something to work with. If you are already in the process of separating, the single most valuable thing you can do is bring in a financial neutral. Not just legal representation, but someone who can map the complete financial picture before any agreement is signed. This role exists. In the UK, they are sometimes called a divorce financial analyst. In mediation contexts, they are called a financial neutral. They give you information that your solicitor genuinely doesn't have the time or the training to give you. Find one. Use one. And if you are already through the other side, if you are in the hard, expensive, exhausting work of rebuilding, I want you to hear this clearly. The rebuild is real. It is slower than anyone tells you. It is harder than the social media version of it. But it happens, and it starts with understanding your actual numbers. Not the ones you hope are true, but the ones sitting in front of you right now. If this conversation gave you something useful today, please share it. With a friend, a sibling, someone you know who is quietly sitting with these questions and does not know where to start. These conversations deserve to reach more people. Subscribe if you want to keep having them. We are here every single week, and wherever you are in this, whatever your situation looks like right now, you are not facing it alone. The finances are complicated. The feelings are even more complicated. And you deserve clear, honest information on both sides of the decision. Take care of yourself. And where you still can, take care of each other.